Hi, thank you for joining my session Don't Bother Your Users with Mobile Device Management. Embrace Modern. My name is Daalmans and I'm a trainer, architect, author and a lead of the Workplace Ninja user group in the Netherlands. In my daily life, I help customers moving towards Microsoft Intune, Azure AD and all those other products which are in the Microsoft Cloud. I wrote a couple of books in the past and for that and being active in the community, I am a Microsoft MVP. Today, I want to tell you a story about the administrator and the administrator modern managing all those mobile devices, all those different flavors of Android, iOS, and in the past we had also Windows Mobile. Of course, when allowing users to connect their mobile device or a corporate device, we want to lock it down because we do that the same with all our Windows devices. So our first thinking is, oh no, we need to lock that device down with a complex PIN, with a lot of restrictive settings. And of course, we need to check for compliance if the settings are still applicable or still valid on the user's device. And of course, maybe there are some use cases when you work in a financial company and dealing with a lot of financial data. Um, Often we have there for that purpose we have a corporate device. But what about bring your own devices? Do we also want to manage that way? Do we want to bother our users with a complex PIN with encryption, which maybe slowing down the device? Uh, People forget that 8-digit PIN again, and at the end we get frustrated users, and frustrated users end up in a phone being erased because after trying it for X number of time, the device will be erased as a security measurement. And frustration often leads to broken devices. And of course, we don't want to have those broken devices because we want to have those users productive on their own device. So instead of looking at securing all those mobile devices, we need to rethink how to of where to focus on instead of focusing purely on the device. Maybe we need to look at securing the apps and the data. Of course, it's a thin line we're working on because we have data at rest, we have data in use and data in motion, and all of those are uh, part of the complete life security life cycle when we talk about protecting data in apps. And um, we need to ask ourselves how are we going to use security measurements and how are we going to achieve this without really locking down and annoying the user. Um, a good feature and a very good feature of Microsoft Intune and a unique feature, if you ask me, is app protection without enrollment. And basically, with this, we can protect apps which are enlightened for Microsoft Intune without being enrolled, without the need of all those restrictive policies I've discussed earlier. So what is required to be able to do this? Of course, apps. And in the past, when I was working with Intune 2015, um, almost no apps were available that could use app protection or app protection without enrollment. But in the last couple of years, Microsoft and all the third-party vendors invested a lot of time and money to also develop apps that support Intune. And this list is already old. So if you look up the complete list in at the Microsoft Docs, you will definitely find more apps for sure. So basically what it is, we can use Microsoft Intune Enlightened apps to configure policies on those and protection policies. And all of the most Microsoft apps support multi-identity. So if we look at the Outlook app, for instance, we have a corporate side and a personal side. And with the app protection policies, we only manage the corporate side of the app. The personal Outlook.com address is for the user themselves, and the corporate address is managed by the company, by the company's policies. So if a user leaves uh, the company can remove the corporate data, but not the personal data, which is great. We can also configure policies to restrict copy and paste, for instance. You can copy personal information to your corporate account, but not vice versa. So we can restrict a lot of things. Also, by adding conditional launch, we can check if a device is rooted or jailbroken, or we can check if a supported version is installed, like iOS 14 or Android 10. And if Android 10 is not available or higher, then the app cannot be used, for instance. Of course, um, this is done without MDM. You can use it together with Intune or any other third-party MDM, but you can use this without MDM. So, and this is a really powerful tool for your bring your own users, or for users that use their bring your own device. So how does this work? We have on one side Azure AD and Intune, and Azure AD takes care of the authentication process. Is the user trying to log on really the user? And after the authentication is completed, the Intune will push down the policies and manage the apps. Add a PIN, maybe use facial recognition to log on, and so on. So, what are the differences for regards to Android and iOS? For iOS, we need the Authenticator app installed to be able to use app protection without enrollment. For Android, we need to have the company portal installed. But why is this? Why don't you use the same app? Why have a different app? Basically, the reason is that the platform OSs are different. And where iOS is really sandboxed, uh, one app cannot communicate with the other app. And on the other side, Android is really open, where an Android app can use resources from other apps. And that's basically the, the, the real reason, is because of Android is a really open platform. It can use resources from the company portal. So most of the Intune SDK, which is required for apps to use or to apply app protection policies, to use the Intune SDK, most of the Intune SDK is integrated in the company portal app. Instead of on iOS, the Intune SDK is integrated in every app themselves, and the authenticator is being used as an authentication broker, which is required to be able to authenticate. So if we look at the capabilities, and we have policies that can block the backup to, for instance, the iCloud or the Google Drive. We can encrypt the data, encrypt the business data. We can restrict transferring data to other apps, or only managed apps, for instance. Only apps that support the Intune SDK. We can configure the requirement of a PIN, the complexity, use of a fingerprint, facial recognition. And if you want to bother your users really, you can require the corporate ID. But this session is all about embracing modern, so we wouldn't want to configure something like that. Of course, also an offline period. So configure a time that every X number of hours a user need to be checked in, so that the device can be checked, or at least the app can be checked if it's still secured or not. And then of course we can check for the rooted jailbroken devices if the right app version is configured. And nowadays we can check if a user is disabled or not. And if something happened, we can selectively wipe the device or block access or reset the pin, depending on the conditional launch. So when are those policies applied? And normally this is done at check-in when somebody signs in with the app, or otherwise every 8 hours. And then unless another policy is applied, then every 30 minutes. A selective wipe is done instantly when the user signs out or at the next check-in. So the app is now protected. But how can we enforce this? Because if somebody wants to use a native mail app, for instance, instead of Outlook, normally a user would be able to do so because it also supports modern authentication. So therefore, we can use conditional access, which is part of Azure AD. And conditional access integrates with the Intune protected apps. So how does this work? We basically have two options. One option, which is there already for a longer time, is that when the user logs in to Azure AD, the Azure AD STS service checks to see if the app which is being used is on the approved client app list within Azure AD. And that approved client app list is basically a fixed list maintained by Microsoft with secret keys which are part of the apps being developed by Microsoft and being used. If an approved client app is being used, the STS provides an access token, and the user will be able to get their email from Exchange. Like I said, this method is only supported for Microsoft apps because it's a fixed list, so no third-party apps are available that supports the required approved client app control in conditional access. So nowadays, or since a long time already, Microsoft developed a new feature, and this feature in Azure AD conditional access is able to check if the app that is being used, if it is protected by an app protection policy. This feature is still in preview, but it works like this. A user logs on to Azure AD. The Azure AD checks to see if Intune has reported that the app protection policy is applied to the app that is being used. In this case, Outlook. If Outlook is reported as protected, then the STS provides an access token. If not, then access will be denied. But if access token is provided, then the user will have access to Exchange Online. So in the meantime, until the require app protection policy is out of preview, we can use this both together. I will show you in a bit how to configure this, but always make sure to use at least conditional access to restrict to the managed app. Um, and hopefully you're able to use it in conjunction with the new feature because it is really great. But what about spyware? And what about if there's some kind of malicious app installed on a device, or a malicious Wi-Fi network is being used? Uh, what should we do then? Do we require MDM to be able to check this? Because, to be honest, mobile devices are also huge target for malicious people, of bad actors. They want to, yeah, be able to access those mobile devices because a lot of information is being held there, and a lot of financial information is maybe available there. So, what can we do about this? We are able to add an extra layer to the security. And this is done by using a mobile threat defense solution together with which supports app protection policies. And basically what it does is by integrating conditional launch with the mobile threat defense, we're able to check for the threat level of the device without being enrolled. The mobile threat defense partner app is being installed and is protecting the device. And if something happens, the threat level will be shared with Azure AD. The information will be stored there and shared with Intune. And then when somebody tries to open the Outlook app and it sees that, okay, a threat is being detected, then we block access or maybe instantly wipe the data. To my knowledge, Intune is the only one doing app protection without enrollment and also integrating with the mobile threat defense partners like this. So how does this work? Typically, your device is being managed or protected by a mobile threat defense partner. Intune is protecting the app, and if a malware is detected, this will be shared to Intune and by the mobile threat defense console of partner, and access will be denied. If the threat is being remediated, you will definitely have access again, which is awesome if you ask me. So let's first have a look at the Intune side. If we are in the Endpoint Manager Admin Center, if we go to Applications, we have a node called App Protection Policies. And in the App Protection Policies, we are able to configure the policies like described earlier in this session. So we are able to pick and choose the apps which supports app protection policies. And this is a huge, extensive list nowadays. So if you look here, you don't see only the Microsoft apps, but also the apps, third-party apps, that support app protection policies. And you're just able to pick and choose those and click select and then save. Regards to the app protection policies, we can restrict access to the backup, of course, restrict cut copy paste, how we can deal with the dialer app, if we can use any dialer app or a specific dialer app. You are able to tune this for your needs. So supporting third-party keyboards or not, or just blocking them. We know that in third-party keyboards often, or not often, but there can be keyloggers in if you have a malicious keylogger. So we are able to block this to be able to access corporate data. We can restrict opening URLs to only use the Edge browser, because Edge we are also able to manage this and protect the data, so we can keep it all contained if required. Next, we are able to configure things around the access requirements, configure the number of digits for the PIN, if it is numeric or a passcode, and so on and so forth. And the conditional launch is basically conditional access light, but we can check the app versions, if an app is of a account is disabled, if it's jailbroken or rooted, or like discussed just now, if, for instance, a threat is being detected. So if a threat is detected with a minimum value, we can either block access or instantly wipe the corporate data, which makes this solution really secure. So if even any threat is detected, if it needs to be secured, so even no low threat may be available, then we can instantly wipe corporate data, not the device, of course. Which is great if you ask me. And the user needs to activate the application themselves, but it is pretty easy and pretty straightforward to activate an app and protect an app with corporate data. So if we move over to conditional access, we have a couple of things we can do. And of course, let's just create a new one. We can create a conditional access rule for the complete Office 365 app. We can select the users. If we select all users, make sure that you don't lock yourself out. So don't use too restricted conditional access policies, or just user group, which you can use, for instance, together with Lookout. So in this case, we are able to select the Office apps, the Office 365. So basically all applications part of Office 365 are automatically protected by this conditional access rule. And we need to configure the conditions. So we want to target this to only iOS and Android devices, because only iOS and Android devices support app protection without enrollment, or at least the app protection policies we are using. We want to do this from any location, and we want to create conditions that it is for the browser access, but also for the modern apps, the mobile apps and desktop clients. And next, we can configure the grant options, where basically the grant controls, access controls, require approved client app is listed. And if we click here, you see the apps that are currently supported. And like said, those are only the Microsoft apps. So Microsoft knows the secret key, and they are able to exchange that data. For the require app protection policy, the list is getting bigger and bigger every month. Slowly, the apps will be added here, and the reason why it is still in preview is because of the fact that the latest SDK needs to be implemented, so that the policy assurance can be implemented also. So all the app vendors, and two of them are third party, have already implemented this, but also the other third parties, but also the internal Microsoft teams need to implement the latest Intune SDK to be able to use this. And this is much more powerful, if you ask me. So you can use this in conjunction, like I said. And instead of using the require all selected controls, you can use select one of those. So either if the app is protected with a policy, then you're allowed to access, or when the app is on the approved client list. This one, of the first one, require approved client app, doesn't guarantee that the app is protected, because if a user doesn't have an Intune license, the app can be used and conditional access will allow it. But if you don't have an Intune license, you will never receive an app protection policy. So you will never be able to protect the app. So if something went wrong in the provisioning of the user, you will end up with unprotected apps. And basically, this should be enough to create this app of this conditional access policy. You can configure to report only or to on. So what is next? And you hear the thunderstorms. What's next? We need to embrace modern. We don't want to bother our users with all those MDM policies and all those protection policies. If it is a bring your own device, and if a user is just using mail and SharePoint access or whatsoever, we will result with happy users. They can be productive with all those big hurdles, and it is a pretty good security. I've used this as a couple of financial customers, and they embraced this concept, and they reviewed this concept because they are really risk and security focused. So it is good enough for them, then it's most likely good enough for you also. With that, thank you for joining me. Make sure to join the community. If you haven't looked at User Voice is a good source for you to gain knowledge about what is happening in the Microsoft Intune space or Config Manager space or Azure space. What's being worked on. If you have an idea, submit it. If you searching for something and you see, hey, that's a great idea, vote for it. Make sure to do that. And join the other communities on Reddit, YouTube, the Workplace Media Network, and MMS. And with that, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully you have an awesome day, and talk to you soon, hopefully in person, otherwise to the next session. Bye bye.